We have about 2 minutes to showtime. 2 minutes. This will give a chance for the chat room to fill in. Welcome to America Free Radio tonight. Have you all here? Got about 1 minute. 1 minute until showtime. About 30 seconds. 30 seconds. We'll bring the studio in and begin tonight. America Free Radio.
Emergency 8 p.m. curfew. Instead of everyone voluntarily dispersing, though, at 8 o'clock, a packed street refused until by 9 p.m. police had had enough, brought in the SWAT armored vehicle, and cleared the crowd.
Fox's Phil Keating from Florida. The first top Biden White House official visited Afghanistan on Sunday.
U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin made a surprise visit to Afghanistan, his first trip to the country since joining the Biden administration. The traveling press pool reported that Austin arrived in Kabul and met at length with Afghan President. It comes amid ongoing peace efforts between the Taliban and the Afghan government, as well as a planned May 1st U.S. troop withdrawal. U.S. commanders warned last week of chaos in Afghanistan if the withdrawal moves forward. The plans are being used by President Biden to get both parties to the negotiating table.
Fox's Trey Yangst. America's listening to Fox News.
Join over 24,000 of some of the fastest growing companies in the world.
This is the Truth Frequency Radio Network. TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
First hour. Greetings, Earth Explorers, and welcome to X Squared Radio. I'm your host, Brooks Agnew, coming to you live from an undisclosed location east of the Appalachian Mountains. This is where the past meets the future, and here the results are always positive. We might go a little past your imagination, but have no fear. We'll be safely traveling with us. We are streaming live from the America Free Radio studios to Truth Frequency Radio, which is where all the truth freaks hang out. We are not afraid to let our truth freak flag fly. We are also streaming live on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, and DLive. So you can join us on any one of those platforms. And we are monitoring all of those chat rooms. So you can chat to us and we will respond. Of course, you can always take advantage of the top chat on YouTube and or on Facebook, and you can make contributions to the program. Andres was first in tonight. Good to hear you out there. Blue Water, Trucker Will, good to see you out there. I know he travels the country bringing hundreds of thousands of pounds of goods to us all over. Tony M., Danny Anktil, or Anstill? I don't know. That's difficult to pronounce, Danny. Not about changing your name? Not sure. I'm not sure. I'm just kidding. Brad M., good to see you. Right on. Good times. Good evening. Good evening, sir. Lieutenant Phil. All right. Out there on D Live. That's good. That's good. Yes, this right here. This comes from Egypt. This is the symbol for eternal life, the dung beetle. And on the back of this is the Ankh. That's wearing that since about 2007. Boo, good to see you out there. That's our moderator. Behave yourself. Let's see, Mark Hovsepian out there. Good too. Good too. Yes, YouTube has the better chat, but D Live has lemons. Right. And Alan, good to see you out there. Baba Susie over there on the Pacific Northwest. Greenheart, oh, so glad to see you out there. That's very good. Let's see, got to Gumroad on the interwebs and type Juan to find 107's 107 book, Kid by the Side of the Road. I bought a 10-pack of books and sold 6 yesterday. Excellent, excellent. Cherokee Drifter, good to see you out there. Hardwick, Big D, 1955. All right, let's get started. We got a lot to go over tonight. Our first story tonight is on measuring consciousness. We've talked a little bit about this from time to time. In the medical profession, we do this with it's kind of a hat you wear, and it has electrodes all over it, and it's got a bundle of wires that goes down to a computer that analyzes the signals that arrive at all of those different transducers all over your head. And they measure about 1,000 neurons around 100 sites of the brain during different states of consciousness. And they do it in primates, but they also do it in humans. If you have some kind of a problem, wake up in the middle of the night confused, you're going to get one of those put on your head, and they're going to check not only electrical activity all over your head, but they're going to check the flow of all the little capillaries and arteries and things around your head. If all those are doing well, they're probably going to send you home. The results were analyzed by machine learning. Results pointed away from the prefrontal cortex, an area monitored to safely maintain general anesthesia, and toward areas at the back of the brain. In the study, it revealed deep brain and areas toward the back of the brain are more predictive of states of consciousness. And the source of this is the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Millions of people are administered general anesthesia each year in the United States, but it is not always easy to tell whether they are actually unconscious. That would be kind of nightmarish, wouldn't it? Scalpel. I'm not asleep. A small portion of those patients regained some awareness during medical procedures, but a new study of the brain activity that represents consciousness could prevent that potential trauma. It may also help both people in comas and scientists struggling to define which parts of the brain can claim to be the key to the conscious mind. What has been shown for hundreds of years in an unconscious state like sleep are these slow waves of electrical activity in the brain. You're familiar with that, aren't you? Slow waves of electrical activity. Anyway, those may not be the right signals to tap into under a number of conditions with different anesthetic drugs in people that are suffering from a coma or with brain damage or other clinical situations. There can be high frequency activity as well. Let's see. University of Wisconsin and Madison researchers recorded electrical activity in about 1,000 neurons surrounding each of 100 sites under drug-induced anesthesia, light sleep, resting wakefulness, and roused from anesthesia into a waking state through electrical stimulation of a spot deep in the brain. We have studied this. Sometimes what they do is they'll drill a small hole in the brain. They will put an electrode deep into the brain with a magnetic coil on it, and they'll put current on that and turn a magnetic field on, and different people have, recollections of memories that have been locked away in the brain for a long time, and they haven't made access to them. Smells and sounds and music and experiences that they have had, both pleasant and traumatic, can be regenerated by doing that. So we're pretty sure that everything we've ever done, everything we've ever smelled, everything we've ever briefly come in contact with is stored somewhere in the gray matter of our head or in the gray matter around our heart. We don't know really how most people integrate all that, or should I say transition that stuff from one area to the other, so that we have the ability to recall it, and we also have the ability to use it as a reference for wisdom to make choices. We go through life kind of like an animal in a maze. And when we do that, scratch right there. When we do that, sometimes we make the same mistake over and over and over again, and sometimes we learn from our past mistakes and we don't go down the same blind alley. Hopefully, that's what we do. But something very strange happens, and that is that we gain enough wisdom so that if we get enough information, enough feedback from the hallway or the particular pathway in life we're going down, even though we've never been down it before, we can use the experience from other times we've been down similar pathways, and we can make decisions. Now, this can be good and this can be bad. It can be good in the sense that you avoid a bad situation. Oh, I remember this. I'm not going there again. But it can also mean that you pass up opportunities for growth, opportunities for love, opportunities for investment and success. Now, it's true that we continuously write a script for ourselves. We think, at least most of the medical profession believes, that we write this script during this lifetime. But we're pretty sure, we have enough evidence, that we bring to this mortality scripts from other existences that we have had. Now, there is an argument both ways, and I'll entertain thoughts in the chat room if you want to. But some believe that we never had any other experiences. We are just being provided information from other sources, like others who have had an experience, who are either telepathically, spiritually, or through some type of communication, sharing that experience with us so that we can use that experience to make a life decision. Others believe that the individual actually had the experience. It makes a lot more sense, especially when you consider some of the more complex and individual, or should I say idiosyncratic activity. Let me give you a case in point. Beethoven. Okay, Beethoven at a very young age, even though he was hearing impaired and later lost his hearing altogether, he was able to, at a very young age, to be able to write music that he could not play yet because he did not have the instruments at his disposal. But nevertheless, he could write the music, and he could write symphonies, which means he could write music for other instruments, violins, horns, drums, piano. It wasn't just one instrument. It was a lot of instruments. It was all tied together. It was very beautiful, very glorious. And he did not have a lifetime of experience, was not exposed to anyone who had that experience. And everything that he did was virtually new and unique, which means to me and to others that have studied that particular case that he brought those scripts with him, and he was able to access them at a very young age. Now, one of the things that we also know is, when we're talking about consciousness, is that children who can gain the ability to communicate with words at a young enough age. Some kids don't really speak effectively until they're 4 or 5 years old. Others, at 2 or 3 years old, they're putting sentences together and expressing thoughts other than I'm hungry, I'm sleepy, I hurt, those kinds of things right now. What we call, temporal communication. They're able to effect spiritual communication or communication that has something to do with thoughts that require experience beyond their years. Let's put it that way. And so, as we've talked about this before, some of them have been able to recall previous lives. But more often than not, what they can do is bring previous skills with them. Mechanical skills, musical skills, literary skills, artistic skills that they could not possibly have had in a single lifetime. So we're aware that although these electrodes are pointed inward at the brain for the sources of consciousness, I don't think that they're bringing in all of the sources of consciousness. They may be tapping into the sensors of consciousness. It's sort of like, if you have an infrared camera and you're out at night, everything is pretty much dark to the naked eye. But once you put the infrared up, you're picking up the heat signatures of everything around you. And one of the things that you'll notice is that there are items that are still very white, very hot. That is to say, they're putting off a good infrared signature, even though they don't have a source of heat themselves. What they're doing is they are reflecting the heat that was put into them by the sun earlier in the day. So they're still radiating heat throughout the night. And that's what you can see. Buildings and roads and pieces of metal. You can see these things at night with infrared, even though they don't have a source of that energy themselves. They're still putting off the residual amount of energy. So the sensor, which is the infrared camera, is picking it up. It's the same thing with the brain. There are all kinds of sensors in what I call the biological transducer. These can sense infrared energy. We have sensors in our skin that can sense infrared energy. We sense it from the sun. We can tell a stove is hot, even though it's black to the eye. We can sense that heat with our hands and with our face. We have very sensitive nerve endings in the hands and the face that are sensitive to heat. Believe it or not, they're more sensitive to cold. There are a lot more cold sensors in the face and in the hands than there are heat sensors. I used to question that when I was young, but it's a true fact. And we think that it has to do with the hand's ability to be tactile. That is to say, to feel shape and to feel texture. It isn't just the roughness, it's also the difference in temperature, which our hands are very, very sensitive. They can detect as little as 0.5 of a degree of Fahrenheit, which is a pretty small amount. But we can tell the difference between two objects, which one is warmer. That's very sensitive. There are other things. We have our eyes. We have rods and cones cells in our eyes that can pick up light, ranging from the high or the low ultraviolet to the high infrared. Some people can see beyond that. Some people can see auras. Some people can see, infrared or violet, and others cannot. Some people can't see all the colors. They're somewhat partially or even fully colorblind. They can only see grays and whites. And so they have to be trained to look at traffic lights and things like that. But there are other abilities. Some believe that the pineal gland, which is a tiny gland that sits in the center of the brain, pretty much right in between the eyes, behind the frontal cortex, it is sensitive to light. It doesn't get any light inside the skull, but it is sensitive to light. Now, we have to define what light is. Light, we tend to assume, is what we can see with our eyes. But light generally means any frequency above, say, radio. So once you get above FM, you're in the light range. You're getting into the nanometer wavelength range that, technically speaking, is light. Now, you don't see it with the eye, but it can be picked up possibly with other sensing parts of the human body. The pineal gland is one of those things. Then we go beyond that. We have the ability to sense time, not just the time that we're in, but also the past and the future. And we can consider it. We can reflect on it. We can reflect on the past, things that have already happened to us. And believe it or not, we can reflect on the future. We can put ourselves in the future and see the results of our actions or inactions or others' actions or inactions. We can sense those. And that becomes part of our psyche, becomes part of our consciousness. The more aware we are of these things, and the more intention we put on being able to utilize these things in our judgment, the better off I think we are. If we go through the world in just the now, which a lot of philosophies do teach that, I think we're back to the rats in the maze. We're back to the rats in the maze. Where am I now in the maze? What am I going to do? What's being done to me? Is it time to eat yet? That's the now. From a physics point of view, I can't tell you how fast now is going through the universe. I can't tell you where it's located in the universe. And if I can't tell how fast it's going and where it's located, it may not exist at all. Now may not exist at all. We may be fabricating now. Yes, you can have two people sitting in the same room next to each other in the same chair, dancing together on the same dance floor. And they have different perspectives of what now is. They do. All of this relates to consciousness. And I think all of this can be measured. It would be interesting to study, although I think it's somewhat romantically attenuating to think of dancing with somebody on a dance floor with a brain cage on with a bundle of wires stretching over to a bank of computers. Still, I'm willing to try it. So beyond just detecting states of consciousness, these ideas could improve therapeutic outcomes from people with consciousness disorders. We could use what we've learned to optimize electrical patterns through precise brain stimulation, and people who are, say in a coma or in a state of a bipolar seizure or a state of confusion. We could realign those things and straighten that out. Could it be used for evil? Yeah, it probably could be. It probably could be. And hence, maybe DARPA should fund it because that's what they usually do, is try to figure out ways to do that. Let's see. Who do we have in the chat room really quick before we go to the next story? Oh, wow. Look at this. Stephen Andres is there. Baba Susie, you're correct. Our bodies are so incredible. A lot of people think that mortal life is hell, that we have somehow been cast here for evil that we have done, or it's karma for something we did in the past. Oh, okay, we'll send them to Somalia. We'll send them to Venezuela and let them try to grow up there and see where they come at from there. It's true that where you're born, what station you're born in, whether you're born in poverty, slavery, or wealth, and even what skin color you're born, can affect your mortal life. It's a fact, unavoidable, but it is something that different people study different ways. The point that I'm trying to make scientifically is that I think that mortal life is a brief and powerful experience, and I think there are several aspects about mortal life that we don't consider unless you listen to America Free Radio, and that is, number one, that there is something called the Akashic Record that most people are aware of, but that Akashic Record can only be written into, the record can only be made in mortality. You can't write the Akashic Record in spirit. It doesn't count. That's why, if you consider it, Jesus had to come here, had to be born a mortal, had to live a mortal life, overcome everything, and then write or establish the resurrection on this world. And I think it's not just a resurrection for this world, it's a resurrection for all worlds in this universe. And it was done here on this planet. So I guess we're lucky to be on this planet, but we're also maybe, one of the worst that we had to see it to believe it. Other planets didn't have to see it to believe it. Be that as it may. The point is that the Akashic Record was written into at that moment, and Christ was the first fruits of the resurrection. The second thing to consider about this is that we are eternal beings. We are eternal beings. We never die, and we have been since the beginning of the universe, or since when Source decided to go from the state of I am to creating all of us from it, from him or her or they. And somewhere out the iterations, that is to say the processes that by which Source divided himself, whether it was I believe it was a square root, so let's just assume for tonight's program it is a square root, that within a very few iterations of square root of square root of square root of square root, we get to 1, or very close to 1, right? 1.004, 1.00002. We get smaller and smaller, but we never reach 1, which means each square root operation produces 2 identical souls. But they're only identical at creation. From that moment, from that instant on, they begin to diverge. They gain different experiences. They cannot gain exactly the same experience. They are unique soul addresses, which means in eternity, we start very close to 1, but then we approach 2 and 4 and then 16. Yeah, and 196. You get it, and it keeps going. What happens is we begin to grow in stature. And that takes place during a mortal life. It takes place very slowly, if at all, in the spirit. Why? Because we don't have the biological transducer. There's no way to interpret the signals around us. They just go through us. We can't stub our toe. We can't wonder what's over the horizon. We can instantly see it. There's no challenge. There's no mountain. There's no depth. There's no shadows. There's no wall. There's no barrier to anything. You could say we know all, but we haven't learned all. So what we do is we create mortal opportunities for the spirit and the physical matter to be combined together to make a body, to make an animated spirit in the body, one that can feel pain and hunger and want, and one that has the ability to create life in its own image. Very powerful situation here. And that each mortality we grow, each mortality we gain abilities. We're going to send TFR on a 3-minute break here, and then we'll address some things in the chat room. And then when we come back, we'll go on to our next story. So I want you to reflect on this, because don't discount mortal life. Mortal life takes place after a tremendous amount of effort and planning, and everything has to go right. If it doesn't go right, it doesn't happen. And unfortunately, there are forces on the earth that know the value of a mortal life, and so they terminate it. They terminate it in the womb. And this is unfortunate, that an infant never gets to breathe, never gets to cry, never gets to eat, never gets to cuddle, never gets to look into the face of their mother. And it happens 1 million times a year. It's a terrible thing. You know, and I know that those that have their mortal life terminated before they ever stop breathing amniotic fluid are going to get another opportunity. They're going to get an opportunity. And there's something, I don't know, that builds up, that adds to the consciousness and the average reality of the universe. Not just for the mother, but also for the person selling the mother on the idea of aborting her baby and actually performing the abortion, and also the baby itself. All these souls are affected by this forever, forever. I can't help but think that there's some point of forgiveness that takes place, because one day that reunion will take place. One day the 40 million babies that have been killed in this country are going to face 40 million mothers. And they're going to forgive their mothers. And the mothers are going to feel what they did. I don't know how long it'll take to get over that, to tell you the truth. I don't know if I ever did it. I don't know if I ever had it done. I know I probably wasn't wanted when I was born, just because of the life situation I was born into. And, you know, if you were to do some Freudian mind meld on me, you would probably find that I probably was never a little kid. I was a grown-up in a little kid's body, struggling to be accepted for who I was and what I was. It didn't happen, so I just accepted myself, right? Same as you. Okay, about 30 seconds, we'll bring TFR back in and we'll go on to our next story. Chat room is alive and kicking. Let's see. Baba Susie says, do you think all of your followers perhaps collaborated in some way in an earlier life? That's a good question. I think that by and large, at least in small portions, we go through existence as pods. I don't know how to put it another way. But I think that the people, the souls that are your children, the souls that are your friends, the souls with whom you have more than just a cursory involvement or encounter in life, you share some things, bodily fluids, food, whatever. I can't help but think that you are somehow bonded together. Let's go ahead and bring TFR back in. There'll be a little intro music.
Now it's time. Hinge and ancient sites, dowsing buried treasure and tapping into this mysterious earth energy.
Enigma.com.
No hate, no hype, no fear. We are TFR, your protection from deception.
Lots of good thoughts in the chat room while everyone was gone there at TFR. Somebody brought up a good thought. Who is it here? Oh, yeah. Of course, Baba Susie, it's a lovely thought. Brad M. says, many of the people that we meet are instrumental in helping us fulfill our soul purpose. You bring up a very interesting point, soul purpose. A lot of people are searching for, what's my purpose? What's my mission? God has something in mind for everybody. We have a plan. There's a plan of some kind, and I somehow got off the plan. How do I get back on the plan? I was considering a philosophical point that Catholics normally have. And that is that the Spirit of God is superior to the spirit of man. And I thought about that for a little while as I'm thinking about Origen's philosophy, which I don't really... if you read his stuff, you'll think at first that it's very illogical, that it has some kind of binary or innate basis upon which he draws his syllogisms and makes his conclusions. But when you consider his life and the fact that self-mutilation was part of the judgment against the flesh, tend to take his philosophy with a little bit more of a grain of salt. But let me just consider this one point, because Brad brought it up, about, let's begin with the value of the Spirit. So the Spirit of God is somehow superior to the Spirit of man. And what I question is the word superior, because in science, we don't like ambiguity. But that is to say, we don't like words that have two meanings, or meanings that have two meanings, or don't listen to what I said, listen to what I meant. The word superior is ambiguous in the sense that, let's consider value, for instance. Would you consider the Spirit more valuable that cannot choose? It has no choice. That is to say, its will is dominating or dominated, and it is written into a set of rules that cannot move? Or would you consider more value in the Spirit that can choose, that has choice, and still chooses good? In other words, is good more valuable through compulsion? That is to say, compulsory means, force or rules or laws, or is it more valuable if it's chosen? Just think about that for a moment. You know, if for instance, let's say that you were raised in a time when marriages were arranged, okay? Your family and some other family have some holdings, and those holdings can probably be made more valuable or larger or more powerful or less assailable if the two families are brought together. And so the parents get together and they say, look, you have a son, I have a daughter. When they're of age, we're going to marry them together. Now, next door is another family with a child about the same age. And your daughter, or your son, let's just say, your son falls in love with the neighbor's daughter. However, he is forced, he is compulsed to marry the daughter of the business partner to bring the value into the two families. Is the marriage, do you think, going to be more happy forced together, or would it be more happy marrying the girl next door? Well, I think you all already know the answer to that. So the point is that I'm trying to make, that what we do in mortality is very valuable because you have a choice. You always have a choice. And by and large, maybe not right at this moment or the last moment, but by and large, your life is the result of your life choices. You are 100% responsible for your life condition. Choices that you made put you in the situation that you're in right now. Now, a lot of people say, well, I didn't choose this. I didn't want this. Yeah, you did. I mean, I can go back through, and we could start today and then talk about yesterday and the day before and the day before, and go all the way back to high school or maybe before, and we could look at the choices that you made. And each one of them had a binary, or at least result, or a binary effect on your path. You turned left, you turned right. You turned right, then right, then right, then left, then left, then left, or you turned left all the time and you circled back on yourself and you're right back where you started. The point that I'm trying to make is it's your choices. Those choices were not made by other people for you. Even your accepting those choices is a choice. So where you are and what you have and what you do is a result of all of the choices that you've made up until this moment. Now, I could tell you that you could make new choices tomorrow, Monday, tomorrow, and you could change your life condition. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, you could. I mean, there are things you'd have to walk away from if it's part of your old paradigm. You'd have to leave your job. You might have to leave your spouse. You might have to leave your house. You might have to leave everything behind. Take nothing but the clothes on your back and your identification and start all over again. Take another job. Move to another country. There are radical changes that people could make in their life condition if they're willing to do it. Greenheart says, I met a twin flame. I was head over heels in love, which is, by the way, a great place to be. You should do it often. And infatuated with her. Ooh, the word infatuated can bring some bad things. Let's continue. She took advantage of me and lightened me of much stuff, money. That was a big lesson in narcissist antisocial behavior disorder. Yeah. Well, narcissism is something that we all deal with in various levels of life. It's difficult to see a narcissist when they're up close because they're so good at gaslighting. Gaslighting means that they become your source of light. You may think like, let's say your child runs up to you and says, Dad, did you see that? I blocked that ball out there on the soccer field. And the dad says, yeah, well, why didn't you shoot at the goal? See, that's narcissism. You are telling the son that he's not good enough. That even though he was excited about what he did, he blocked the ball from the other player. He is now despondent because he didn't shoot the ball. Maybe he didn't have the confidence to shoot the ball. Maybe he can barely run, let alone run and kick the ball at the same time. Maybe he was afraid that if he kicked the ball, he would kick it wrong, it would go out of bounds, and he would be criticized. See what I'm saying? A narcissist can be seen as someone to help you grow, to help you become better. But a true narcissist will say that you cannot become better without me. That's what the narcissist will say. They will never let you be on your own, and everything that you do on your own is not good enough. They will always come to you and say, well, I would have done it this way, or you should have done this. And they will always make you doubt your position, always make you doubt what you are and what you can do. And unfortunately, Greenheart got lightened to some cash in the meantime, but it's a good lesson, isn't it? They're still hard to spot. Still hard to deal with. And you can't go through life not dealing with them. You have to learn to live with them and love them just the same. Let's see, 2020. That's why I will see you in the next one is such a powerful statement. Yeah, that's right. See you on the other side is another one, right? Let's see. Space Lincoln Landrew. That's a very good handle on YouTube. I was Alaric the Great and sacked Rome. Miss those days. That's so good. That's so good. I don't know, actually. I mean, I know what I did in one past life, but it wasn't anything glorious. It was at the end of the age for that planet. Dixie Doodle, good to see you on D Live. Let's see here. All right. Let's move on to the next story. So much chat here. I'll catch up with you. Dusker Hugh, that's good. I like that. Space Shot is where I started. RP led me to OFTV a year ago. Frank sent me here. Very good. See? Everything you do eventually affects the universe. It's true. Good to have you here. Dixie Doodle says, I'm pretty new to D-Live. I'm not certain, but I think it was RP I came here with. Red Pill 78. Good close friend. Other podcaster. Very, very brilliant. He's a good Q analyzer and has a great voice, and he does a good job at this genre. And he was big on YouTube. Big, like 250,000 subscribers. And YouTube evaporated him. And It's a young age to have a life crisis at, but we welcomed him into D Live. He did quite well. And, when this is your livelihood, it's a big deal. For me, it's a hobby. You guys come in, we have a great conversation, we bond over the years, and it's great. It's wonderful. You're better for it. I'm better for it. We have a good relationship that will last forever. But if you all went away and it was just me talking here to the ethos, and it was being recorded on all these mediums, and some year from now somebody stumbles on them and watches them, I've done my job. I put it out there. I'm messing with the AI right now, and you are participating that way. So let's talk a little bit about someone who escaped Poland. This story really moved me. There's a Michigan restaurateur, and she was arrested a couple days ago over alleged violations of state made-for-TV virus orders. Her legal advisor told the news. Rick Martin and Marlena Hackney, purveyor of Marlena's Bistro and Pizzeria in Holland, was arrested 1 block from her home by Michigan State Gestapo. Hackney has refused to close her establishment despite multiple orders from the state to close after reopening last summer. She was told by a judge, surrender by Thursday, which she declined to do. According to Martin, Hackney is on her way to Lansing, a godforsaken place 100 miles away, to appear before a magistrate. Michigan Capital Confidential reported Hackney fled communist Poland as a teenager and came to America for freedom. Marlena Hackney has lived under a threat of imprisonment since March 4th, when Attorney General Dana Nessel and the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development petitioned a court to enforce a shutdown order targeting Marlena's Bistro and Pizzeria. What a terrible thing to do. The reason, I may put my special sound effect because this is a reason that comes from the state. Non-compliance with emergency COVID rules on restaurant capacity, mask wearing, and physical distancing. In an interview with Michigan Capital Confidential, Hackney said in March of 2020, she closed the business she has owned for nearly 2 decades after Governor Gretchen Whitmer declared a made-for-TV virus emergency and imposed a first round of business lockdowns. She said, I work hard, you work hard, and you can accomplish many things. My employees depend on me, she said. I'm the one who has to pay the bills. The city's not giving me a break on my property taxes. It takes someone escaping communism to show Americans how to be American. Well, I have an update. Hackney, let's see. She was arrested, and she was arrested for contempt of court. And she is being held without bond. Yes, she was denied bond, and she remains in an Ingham County jail. That means that she's going to stay in prison until her trial date. And we don't have a trial date. It could be the summer. She is going to be held in a prison because she refused to close her restaurant and was ordered to turn herself in on Thursday. She ignored that demand. She was arrested early Friday and taken to the Lansing jail. By the way, supporters are still outside her restaurant as we speak. They lined the roadway and they filled the parking lot of her eatery. I'll tell you, there's going to be a hell of a price to pay for Gretchen. She's got to go down. She has to go down. See how many people we have on tonight. A little over 100. We have a little over 100. So I'll tell you what I will do beginning the next hour. We have so many people on DLive. It's crazy. I'm going to give away some lemons on DLive. There's nothing I can give away on YouTube, but I appreciate and love you all so much for being there on YouTube. Remember, down at the bottom, there's a little square, has a $sign in it. That's called Top Chat. You can access that and, make your contribution stand out. It will go out to the world. Everyone will see it. It'll be awesome. And we have listeners on Twitter, and we have listeners on Facebook. We have 7 people on Twitch. We love Twitch. Twitch is an amazing platform, really is. Sometimes during the day, when you're working on blueprints or something, you want something to listen to, you can go to Twitch, and there are all kinds of musicians there, playing guitar, playing piano, singing original songs, and they'll talk with you. They'll exchange with you, and you can sort of like being in their studio with them. It's very cool. I like Twitch. Twitch is a good place to be. And we have people, let's see, 3 or 4 in TFR's chat room, but so many other chat rooms to participate in, and I'm watching them all. Not that I'm omniscient, but I'll try to keep up with you. What is that, Greenheart? A man who owns a UPS store in Northeast Kingdom, Vermont, Newport, lost his franchise license over the face diaper nonsense. Now he needs a lawyer. We need to sue these corrupt politicians. Well, I will share a story with you if you didn't hear it already out there on social media. I went to the gym this weekend because I have the week off. And I went in my workout clothes, scanned my little barcode, and turned to put my gloves on and walk in. And this rather large young man behind the counter said, "Hey, you can't go in without a mask." And I've been going to work out at this gym for a decade. And I said, just check the computer. I'm in the computer. I have a medical exemption. And he said, well, we're willing to accommodate your medical exemption, but you have to wear a face shield. I said, I'm not wearing a face shield. He said, then you can't work out. I said, maybe you don't understand. I've been working out here since you were in elementary school. And 52 miles from here, they're not doing this. Wearing the mask is not healthy. He said, it doesn't matter. There's a mandate. I said, there is no mandate. He said, it doesn't matter. I said, I'm a free American, and I'm going to breathe freely when I work out. He said, not in here, you're not. I said, so what are we going to do here? I have a membership, and you're not going to let me work out. He said, well, you can resign your membership. Wow, you should have seen my pupils. They went really dark at that moment. And if there wasn't a guy 6'4" standing behind him, I might have taken a step forward. I kind of waited for him to take a step forward because it would have been entertaining. And I was being flanked by another guy behind me. That's all right. But you know what? All the people on the bicycles, all the people on the elliptical machines, they were watching me. They were watching the situation. Oh, yeah. They were all wearing masks. But the eyes above those masks were the eyes of the defeated, the eyes of people held in solitary confinement. And so I looked this young man straight in the eye and I said, you're not going to put me in solitary confinement. He said, what was that? I said, you're not going to put me in solitary confinement. I'm not strapping that thing across my face just because you say I have to do it. He said, then you need to resign your membership. I said, you know what? Bring it up. I'll sign it. I will tell you this. You know how hard it is to bring up in the computer a resignation form for you to sign on that little liquid crystal screen that they bring up? It would probably take me 5 minutes to find that. He had it up in 5 seconds. My guess is this young man had probably already done that 20 times already that day, 20 times. He was that skilled at it. I signed it. I flipped my UPC down on the table, and I said, I'll be back. to work out at the gym that buys you out when you go out of business. And I walked out. Yeah. You think I let my pride get in my way? You think I let my 10-year membership at that gym go because of the arrogance of this young punk? I don't think so. I think I stood my ground and I walked out of free America. And you know what? I worked out anyway. At home. Oh, yeah. We're still in great shape. We're still in great shape. And that restaurateur, she's going to pay her price. Yeah. But she's going to come out a martyr. And Gretch, oh, she's going to get hers. That woman's never going to hold public office again as long as she lives. Maybe they can't get her out of office now, but she'll be out of office soon enough. And Michigan will never look that way again. Because of Hackney, because of her pizzeria, because of her story. Because, yeah, Trucker Will, we are cheering her on. We cheer on everyone who refuses to kneel before the face diaper. What do you call them? Face diaper. We got to come up with help me out, chat room. We got to come up with a word for them, a title for the face diaper enforcers. What's going on right now is designed for one thing and one thing only, and that is killing the middle class. The made-for-TV virus has dominated all of our lives for the last year. Although tens of millions of Americans have contracted the disease, less than 25,000 people without comorbidities died of it. The Trump economy was roaring and showing signs of ushering in an age of prosperity that the middle class had not seen in over 100 years. This was their chance to buy a house. This was their chance to start a business, to pay off debts, and secure the American dream, no matter what country they lived in. The global syndicate has one enemy throughout time, and that's us. Within days of the most sweeping trade agreements with China ever signed, the made-for-TV virus was unleashed on the world. Someone made a phone call, and within hours, 187 countries began locking down healthy citizens and shutting down their economies. It was like a Great Depression was ordered up and delivered whether people wanted it or not. No one could resist. Anyone who spoke out against it was smashed instantly. Bank accounts canceled, ad campaigns ended, social media banishment. You simply went from prosperous to poverty within hours. To this day, nobody knows who made that call. Although the made-for-TV virus is a fabricated pandemic, it is a challenge for us. We must maintain a holistic view of world events, just as there are allegedly epidemiological factors to consider in this crisis. The design is also economic. It is social, it is cultural, and it is political. It is precisely these factors that are so often forgotten in the panicky reporting, in the constant manic, meaningless, and inflated tracking of the current infection numbers as it's coupled with slick marketing and copywriting to subconsciously equate infection with death. Never forget, ever, that the main function of this campaign is to crush the middle class. Okay, TFR is on its 3-minute break. It's to crush the middle class. Although the made-for-TV virus is supposed to make the fear apocalyptic, it has one focus. Monetary policy is also a primary tool. alongside fiscal policy used by governments to influence economic activity. When a crisis hits, an economy is stimulated either by the state budget, which arises from the taxpayers, or silently through monetary expansion. I'm going to open your eyes to a tool that's being used, a weapon that's being used by the global syndicate right now as we speak. You're already feeling the effects of it, but you haven't seen anything yet. It's a small wound now. Either lowering interest rates, issuing government-backed securities, or even purchasing corporate bonds, the central banks increase the money supply in the economy. Now, ever since the beginning of the made-for-TV virus pandemic, the U.S. Federal Reserve has done all of the above. Now, I got to ask you this question. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? Normally, we use the price of gold or silver to judge whether government has gone too far in printing money, right? We do this all the time. But the banks, they've sold hundreds of thousands of short contracts on those very metals in their vault, specifically to keep the prices artificially low. The canary in the mine has an inside source of oxygen. You're dying, and you don't even know it, because you're listening to the song of a happy golden bird. Well, I'm going to reveal to you that there's a lens that you can use to watch what the global syndicate is doing to you. It's an economist tool, and it's called M1. It consists of the most highly liquid assets. You think about this for a second. What the hell is a liquid asset? It's like gold and silver. These are the most easily exchangeable assets used as payment for goods and services, right? Gold, pork bellies, orange juice, cars, okay? You can buy stuff with gold and silver. Consider it a black market currency. As trading economics data shows, that behind the backs of the middle class, the Fed has created 39% of all the dollars in the economy in 2020. Think about that. 39% of the economy. Let's bring TFR back in.
You are now tuned into the truth frequency.
We are TFR. TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
Second hour. So, to put it on its head, in 2020, the Fed has created more money than in almost 100 years of its existence. You didn't see it, did you? Did you think that all those people could lose their jobs, all those trucks could be going down the highway, all those goods could end up at Amazon or Walmart or at the other big box stores that were artificially kept alive? You think all that could have happened without cash being in the system? Where do you think that money came from? It came from the Fed. You think holding on to cash is smart. I did too for a long time. For a long time. It used to be cash. It just has a good sound, doesn't it? Everybody likes the sound of it. Everybody likes the sound of cash. But nowadays, it's very risky. Trust me when I say this. The The global syndicate is moving money into liquid assets. Lots of it. All of it. Monetary policy is being used to set up the middle class, just like it was in 1928. Equity markets have relentlessly rallied over the last 12 months. Go figure. You have a Robinhood account, right? You got a Ameritrade account. You're watching the stock prices. You're hearing it on the news if you don't own stocks. It's pushing valuations to extreme levels based on traditional metrics, right? Money is so cheap, corporations are borrowing money to buy back their own stock off the market. Now, admittedly, that's a little like taking a credit card to pay off your home mortgage, but it's working for them, not for the corporation or the big shareholders of the corporation who are selling their shares into the market. Yeah. Normally, when you dump a bunch of shares onto the market like that, the price goes down, right? But it doesn't, because the corporation is the one putting the buy order in, and they're not making it lower than what the price is on the market. So the price is staying high. The executives are pocketing all that borrowed money that they borrowed against the corporation. It's now their money, and now they can resign, they can retire, and they can go away. You think that the reason all these CEOs and all these high executives in these corporations, you think the reason they're retiring is because they've committed some crime? They're on some list of committing crimes against children or committing some crime, and so they're going to be arrested. No, they're retiring because they're rich. They're retiring because they sold all their shares in the corporation into the market, and they stuffed their pockets full, and they're ready to go enjoy life. Why work for the rest of my life? I sold the shares I got when I hired on. In this report, they analyzed the two common arguments by equity bulls. These are people that think the market's always going to go up. Why this time is different and current valuations are justified. We find that markets are either currently mispricing gold or equities, as either of these arguments could imply that gold should outperform stocks. It hasn't. Nominal gross domestic product, which is all the stuff that the country produces, okay, it would have to actually increase by over 80%, 85%, to bring the total market cap back to 100%. That's the $40 trillion that we normally put out. Obviously, we're not doing that. Because why? Because Marlena Hackney's restaurant's closed. That's why, as an example. Or by 63% to bring it to 120%, which is $35 trillion. So let's also assume that the U.S. economy grows by 2% in real terms. That's very meager, but let's just make that assumption over the long run, okay? Now, over a period of 5 years, that would bring the nominal GDP to just $23.6 trillion. That's not the value of it. It's way higher than that. The global syndicate is relying on inflation to fill that gap. They are putting out $23.6 trillion, but they're inflating it so it looks like it's more than it is. Okay? Inflation would have to be averaging 10% to bring equity prices in line with the GDP in 5 years. And that would require equity prices to stay flat for the next 5 years, which they may or may not. That is why gold prices have not gone up, okay? They have to hold the liquid asset prices down so they can move tomorrow's money at the lowest interest rates of today. Now, as good as it might seem at first glance, creating money out of thin air doesn't bring prosperity. It brings it for a few, but not for the many. Simply spending or sending out $1,400 checks out to working class people is having exactly the effect they want. It suppresses worker attendance by up to 15%. Do you know why you can't buy a new refrigerator at Lowe's? Because they cannot even order any until April 23rd. The factories cannot make them to meet even modest demand because there are not enough people in the factory to make the product. You get it? The global syndicate is competing for the same worker by sending him money to stay home, playing video games. You don't believe me? Why don't you check Zynga's stock price? Zynga is the publicly traded company that owns hundreds of online video games like Candy Crush. Seen TV commercials for it lately? Selling mind-numbing online video games to you via television? Seriously? Yeah. Dead serious. In the meantime, it is true. Inflation is like water behind the dam right now. It hasn't started banging on our doors, but look no further than the asset prices. We could clearly see that the low inflation rate is masked by the asset price inflation. And don't just look at gas prices. That's easy. Look at dried mushrooms. Look at bread. Look at soup. Look at ice cream and other foods. They have seen a 50% increase in prices where you don't often notice it. Why don't you take out your grocery bill, if you have one laying around, from a year ago, okay? When the Trump economy was still strong. Notice the items you normally buy. People buy pretty much the same, more or less, grocery items when they go shopping. Look at the prices. That's where the inflation shows up, okay? Even with the evacuation, the evacuation of the gross domestic product for nearly 6 months last year and an unemployment rate that stands more than double the rate before the crisis started, the S&P 500 is more than 10% higher than on the day the pandemic rolled around. This also shows who profits from the economic response made to the made-for-TV virus. Look around. You know who it is. It's the people with assets. For example, it's the people that are already wealthy. The middle and the lower classes, the working poor, they get wiped out because they only know to keep cash in the bank for a rainy day. That's the only thing they know what to do with it. The typical working poor, they can't produce $500 in cash on a moment's notice. Can't do it. They can't do it right now. The typical investor class, American, they can't write a check for $2 million cash either. Why? Because all their wealth is in liquid assets. Besides stocks and bonds, jewels, gold, silver, platinum, and even real estate, although that is not considered really a liquid asset. The made-for-TV virus has closed the businesses where the middle class spend their money. The children of the middle class and working poor are not in school because the teachers are in Puerto Rico on the beach spending taxpayer dollars. The syndicate's children, they never missed a day. Their schools never closed. Thus, the exact same global syndicate institutions who say publicly they are fighting for equity between the classes continue to increase economic inequality, thrusting the made-for-TV virus right in our faces when we resist. Listen closely. There are 150 million Americans who are ready to stop this. They're standing by, listening to me tonight. They may have never done anything before except perhaps vote, but we all saw how fruitless that effort was. They saw a man with barely 18 million votes walk away from the table with the presidency. They see a woman who never got a single vote, never raised a single dollar, never won a single debate, and never won an election against a real opponent, standing by with her sinister smile and her chilling laugh, to step up to the seal and order us to kneel. No one voted for her. No one trusts her. No one wants her. And yet there she is. You know it, and I know it. Now I'm shouting once again down the halls of the empty schools and the empty malls to bring out the leadership. Where are you? The world sees the most lethal military of all time kneeling in shame. The world sees the most armed and free people in the world willingly strapping their faces into solitary confinement to avoid embarrassment at the grocery. I resigned my membership at the health club 3 days ago. I worked out there for 10 years. I told you. I, by the way, wrote the company. And they said, we're so sorry for your inconvenience. End of story. I'm a free American, and I choose liberty. I choose truth. Now, where is the leader who will command us? It will take someone with a voice and a love for America. Where are you? All right. That's as far as I dare go with that. Let's go ahead and give away some lemons right now. Let's see what happens out there. Let's see here. Okay, we're up to a good amount. Let's see what we got here. Oh, let's add a little bit more. We'll put some more lemons in there. Okay. No, not enough. Let's add a little bit more. Okay, now we're up to a good amount. All right, ready? We're going to distribute. All those people that are listening on D Live are going to get lemons in 29 seconds. See who that is. Many of you request and have written me the nicest emails about reading a chapter out of one of the books. Well, tonight I decided to pick Charm of Favor. I read a couple chapters out of a Birth trilogy the other day, and people liked it. So I'm going to read you chapter 8 out of the Birth trilogy. 2 seconds, 1 second, and there it is. Michael, 1973, 66.2 lemons. 2020, 38.4. Lieutenant Phil, 28.1. See, it pays to show up. Lieutenant Phil, awesome. And Vonnie Kinsey, 22.5. So that's just for listening tonight. Thank you very much for being part of the America Free Radio family. That's real money. It's a cryptocurrency that's inside of DLive, but you can take that money and you can trade it for dollars simply by connecting your bank account. By the way, I noticed we have a lot of followers, up pretty close to 500 followers in there, but no subscribers. You know, you can do that in DLive. You could subscribe to me, and that will help me get a little bit closer to becoming a affiliate, not an affiliate, but a partner in DLive. That's what we really want to see. Yeah, there you go. All right, let's read chapter 8, shall we? How much time do we have in this hour with TFR? Oh, we have about 10 minutes. We might be able to do it. Let's see what happens. There's a character in the book whose name is Jack Rousseau. She is a 18-year-old in this chapter, and she's in high school, and she's in her high school history class. So here we go. Jack Rousseau's senior year gym coach was also the social studies teacher. But Kenneth Thomas Larson was no ordinary coach, and he certainly was no ordinary teacher. Mr. Larson was the golf coach and the veteran son of a retired 3-star general. While his father's command group moved from one facility to another, Mr. Larson showed his incredible talent for golf by teaching the officers' wives how to better play the game. It began at the age of 19 when his father moved to an air training command base in Denver, Colorado. While riding the shuttle bus one day from the Airmen's Club, after drinking a couple of pitchers of beer, he boasted of his skill at golf. The base golf pro happened to be on that same shuttle bus. Within a few brags back and forth, the bus had a nice pot of about $300 to see the two battle it out on the beautifully manicured base golf course. Mr. Larson had never seen the course, wearing shorts, sneakers, and had to rent a set of clubs. Nevertheless, within 9 holes, the wagers changed hands, and Lowry Air Force Base had a new golf instructor. The talented Mr. Larson also knew his American government. Jack liked him because he would sit on a stool in front of the class and take his class to places in history like a time traveler. It wasn't just Thomas Jefferson hand-writing the Declaration of Independence. It was the thinking and pacing that he made before dipping his quill in the ink. Each word of passion and vision was perfectly timed and laid onto that parchment. There were no erasures. There was no pile of crumpled, attempted declarations on the floor. It was perfection of a great man's soul, inspired of God and dried on handmade paper, that made the foundation for the oldest constitution the world had ever known. He also knew what government had become. It was this that fascinated Jack the most. The vision of Jefferson, Madison, and Adams reached as far as candlelight could take them. They could not see electricity or aircraft or the internet, but they had seen men who thought they were kings. They saw government so powerful that it removed all hope for nearly every living soul of ever seeing anything other than the serfdom their grandparents had seen. They also saw the wake of another intelligence sailing far in front of them in time. They knew it was there, ahead, digging a pit for the people about to be handed the keys to their own government. The Founding Fathers planted a government with 3 branches. They each had separate powers, with separate weapons, but they were equal in strength. In order for the tree to grow, provide protection, and bear fruit, the 3 branches had to work together, said Mr. Larson. It's no wonder they don't get anything done, said Jack without raising her hand. It's called deliberation. The finest steel is made from many blows with the hammer and the refiner's fire, said Mr. Larson. Then how come things are so screwed up? Asked Jack. I'm glad you asked that question. You see, somewhere along the way, as the story goes, someone snuck into the garden and planted something else alongside. Let's just call it a graft for now, but it's not really a graft. It took a while, but about 84 years ago, it burst out of the ground after wrapping itself around the roots of our tree. It has now become a 4th branch, said Mr. Larson. There's no 4th branch of government in our book, Mr. Larson, said Jack. That's a brilliant observation, Miss Rousseau. But that does not change the facts, said Mr. Larson. Allow me to enlighten you with an example. The United States Environmental Protection Agency is an agency of the federal government of the United States which was created for the purpose of protecting human health and the environment by writing and enforcing regulations based on laws passed by Congress. The National Environmental Policy Act of 1969 was signed into law by President Nixon on January 1, 1970. The law created the Council on Environmental Quality that answered only to him. The council required that a detailed statement of environmental impacts be prepared for all major federal actions significantly affecting the environment. Nixon appointed a man named William Ruckelshaus as the first EPA administrator. Now, this was not actually part of the president's cabinet, but this new administrator had cabinet-level power, and it very soon became known in July of that year as the Environmental Protection Agency. Yeah, the EPA. They're the good guys, right? Asked Jack, as though this was a personal discussion between her and Mr. Larson. What you are about to learn here you may not ever hear again, so I suggest you pay close attention. You should recall we talked about the Nixon impeachment. Well, in April of 1973, the fire under the Watergate kettle was being stoked by Democrats on every TV channel that could spare the time, and the whole thing was about to boil over. Nixon's chief of staff, H.R. Haldeman, and his domestic affairs advisor, John Ehrlichman, resigned. Ruckelshaus was pulled out of the EPA and made acting director of the FBI, and then later that same year was shifted over to deputy attorney general. This was where the test of loyalty came in, said Mr. Larson, as he slid off his stool and began pacing in front of the classroom. As he continued, you see, Nixon knew what they were planning because he'd raided their headquarters. Nowadays they call that hacking, but in those days it was done by breaking in and going through the files. They knew he knew. So Nixon ordered Ruckelshaus to fire the Watergate special prosecutor Archibald Cox, who had been assigned the task of convicting Nixon. Well, he quit rather than follow that order. He was not loyal to the president. He was loyal to someone else. Or should I say, to something else. After leaving the Justice Department, Ruckelshaus returned to the private practice of law. Soon after that, he and his wife and 5 children moved to Seattle, Washington, where he accepted a position as Senior Vice President of Legal Affairs of the Weyerhaeuser Company, said Mr. Larson, writing with chalk on the board. You mean the plywood company? Asked Jack. Oh, much more than that. Weyerhaeuser owns more standing timber than just about any company on earth. They have an executive revolving door with the EPA, said Mr. Larson. He also served as director of a company called American Water Development. For generations, ranchers and farmers have worked the soil of the high, huge valley between the San Juan and Sangre de Cristo mountains. 5 generations of water rights were now controlled by Ruckelshaus and his small group of powerful businessmen. Water means survival for those who can get it, riches for those who control it, and bankruptcy or moving trucks for those left without it. Disputes over water are frequent and often intense. More people have been shot over stolen water than over almost anything, any other commodity. So it didn't take long before Mr. R and his friends learned how his neighbors felt about their plan to sell millions of gallons of water from an aquifer below the valley floor to states across the West. It didn't stop him from becoming one of the most powerful people in the western United States. You only thought being president makes you powerful. Now you see what real power is like. Second one. Okay. But I thought the EPA protected nature from big corporations, said Jack. Oh, see, that is what most people think. The truth is that they protect big corporations from competition with small companies. They use land, air, and water to do it. We're talking trillions of dollars here. In 1983, the EPA was already in crisis due to mass resignations over the mishandling of the Superfund project. That was a gigantic slush fund President Ronald Reagan had set up to clean up environmental messes. I could tell you stories. But the point is that whenever the government starts throwing big money around, big corruption results. So Reagan calls up good old loyal Ruckelshaus to serve as EPA administrator once again. This time it was White House Chief of Staff James Baker who was Ruckelshaus's champion in asking him to return to the agency. They gave him maximum autonomy in the choice of new appointees and refocused the agency on its fundamental mission. Within a year, the press and Congress got back in line, and on February 7, 1985, he retired from the EPA. He was quoted as saying, "At the EPA, you work for a cause that is beyond self-interest and larger than the goals people normally pursue. You're not there for the money. You're there for something beyond yourself," said Mr. Larson. Wow. "I like when you tell us the history behind the history," said Jack, breaking her stare at the time-traveling teacher. "We have about 5 minutes left of class. I want to give you a glimpse of the real power in the fourth branch of government. I think you'll find it surprising," said Mr. Larson. No sooner did Ruckelshaus retire from the EPA, but he joined Perkins Coie, a Seattle-based law firm. You see, while he was being the noble soldier for the EPA from 1983, he served on the World Commission on Environment and Development set up by none other than the United Nations. On top of that, in 1988, he became the chairman and chief executive officer of Browning Ferris Industries of Houston, Texas. You might know them as BFI. "You see their blue dumpsters all over town," said Mr. Larson. "Are you talking trash, Mr. Larson?" asked Jack, and the whole class laughed out loud. "Trash, indeed. You see, it's long believed that one of the most powerful organized crime activities in America is the collection and handling of trash. Where once there were many, now there is only one. Nearly every can in America dumps into a truck controlled by the largest multinational alternative investment firm in the world."
Explanation why I can't stay here forever. Why you? And if I press on, will you wait? Will you wait for me forever? Or would it be wrong to ask you to come with? Tell me, will you wait?
Nearly every can in America dumps into a truck controlled by the largest multinational alternative investment firm in the world, Blackstone Group. By the way, they are the world's 5th largest private equity firm by committed capital, focusing primarily on leveraged buyouts of more mature companies. In other words, they buy up competition. This guy, Ruckelshaus, had it all, didn't he? I mean, he had the trees, the water, and the trash, said Jack. What would you say if I told you he didn't stop there? President Bill Clinton appointed him as U.S. envoy in the implementation of the Pacific Salmon Treaty. He was that from 1997 to 98, and then in 99, he was appointed by Governor Gary Locke as chairman of the Salmon Recovery Funding Board for the state of Washington. And then, in the early 2000s, he was appointed by President George W. Bush to serve on the United States Commission on Ocean Policy. And on September 20th, 2004, the commission submitted its final report to the President and Congress, an ocean blueprint for the 21st century. Since June of 2010, he has served as co-chair of the Joint Ocean Commission Initiative. Mr. Larson, there is no way we're ever going to remember all of this, and it's not in our book, said Jack finally. Oh, one more thing. Remember I told you about the executive revolving door at the EPA? Well, Mr. Ruckelshaus serves, or has served, as a director on boards of several corporations, including Monsanto, Cummins Engine Company, Pharmacia Corporation, Solutia, Coinstar, Nordstrom, and Weyerhaeuser Company. He controls more than 27 million acres of timber, genetically modified foods, cell phones, and nearly all the fish in the sea that we consume in America, and is the director of the Initiative for Global Development, said Mr. Larson, holding his hands out as wide as he could in front of the class. He has to be the most powerful man in the world, said Jack. He certainly is one of them. After all, before anyone could cast the first vote for any candidate, on April 17, 2008, he endorsed a virtually unknown man from Chicago who had never had a paying job in his life, named Barack Hussein Obama, for President of the United States. And the rest, so they say, is history, said Mr. Larson as the bell rang for class to end. I have to know, Mr. Larson, said Jack as she shouldered her book bag and walked up to him from her desk. Why did he pick Obama? I mean, what the hell? Asked Jack. We'll get into more of this tomorrow. But if you're really interested in knowing about all of this, I think you should become an intern. You'll get to see some of this up close and personal. I have an application right over here. Just fill it out. And we'll see about getting you in, said Mr. Larson, handing her the portfolio. My brother works as an asphalt lobbyist. He says they're all whores over there, said Jack. Well, if that was true, our nation would have been lost a long time ago. They always need good leaders who can take a punch. And in my book, good leaders come from good interns. You can take a punch, can't you? Asked Mr. Larson as he looked at the slight bruising under her left eye. I'll check it out. See you tomorrow, said Jack, stuffing the portfolio into her book bag and zipping it closed. Good participation today. Be good, said Mr. Larson as Jack bounced through the door and into the river of young people in the hallway. Math was always easy for Jack, so the final hour of school spent in the middle of algebra class went quickly. She pored over the application to be an intern for the United States Senate and had the blanks filled in by the time the bell rang. She packed up her things, slid both arms through her book bag, and began the walk for home a mile away. Fair weather days like this, she skipped the city bus and walked to stay in shape. Taekwondo was later in the evening now that she was competing in a junior city league. It gave her time to drink a protein shake and change into what her mother said was her combat gear. She had become a champion of sorts, mostly because a Rousseau wouldn't have it any other way, but also because it gave her a feeling of invincibility in front of people. Even during casual conversation with someone on the outside, she was calm and made easy eye contact. But inside, she was imagining a maneuver to catch her opponent's advance and thrust him to the ground with her heel on his neck. She arrived at the dojo early, as usual, worked out with her age group and helped stretch and catch the new students who were learning the sport. Maybe she could have made more money learning golf from Mr. Larson than history, but she gathered there were not many tour champions who'd kick someone's ass in 3 jabs and a roundhouse kick to the side of the head. She knew that her father was proud of her, even though he was trapped in a body that couldn't speak or write. She wondered if he could see the universe changing, because she was in it, because she intended to grab it and push it around. There are two kinds of people in the world, Jackie, he used to say. There are those who are affected by the universe and those who affect the universe. You're going to change everything. She wondered if she was loving him enough and suddenly flushed by the thought of coming up short. She reminded herself to hug him long and hard the first thing when she got home. She stepped up to the heavy bag one more time and spun her hip to snap her long leg around to slap her heel against the leather level with her forehead. It crumpled as the chain above it jingled its complaint. Yeah, better put some ice on that, asshole, she thought. Hey, Mr. Larson, I finished that application. Here you go, said Jack. Why am I not surprised? I made a couple of calls last night. My father thinks you would fit nicely over at the Pentagon, said Mr. Larson, taking the application portfolio from her. The Pentagon? Asked Jack with a tone of disbelief. I thought we were talking about the Capitol. I even did some online shopping for clothes, dresses and shit. Oh, sorry, she said, covering her mouth. You can wear slacks over at the Pentagon, and believe me, it's full of plenty of politics, said Mr. Larson. Well, just let me know, said Jack as she slung her book bag under her desk and sat down. Today, I want you to consider the possibility of the end of private property, began Mr. Larson. Most of you don't watch the news, not on purpose anyway. Your parents probably watch it. Some watch the mainstream propaganda channels, and some watch programs that are less of a slick sales job. Still, you're not going to get the truth, most of the time. Let's say I gave you a special credit card. One of the best features about this card is that someone else makes the payments on the card. What would you do? Asked Mr. Larson, putting his hands together under his chin like he was praying for a moment. Go shopping, said Jack without hesitation. The class laughed. Exactly. That is exactly what you would do. But let me tell you about one of the bad features of this card. You have to buy everything with it. Food, housing, transportation, healthcare. Everything must be bought with this card. Oh yes, one more thing. The card is paid off once a year. Now, what would you do? Asked Mr. Larson. The class was silent for a moment until someone raised their hand. Mr. Larson pointed. How much of a limit is there on the card? I mean, is there enough to get through a whole year? That's a lot of stuff, said the student. Well, a smart person would sit down and make out a budget, right? I assume you want 3 meals a day. I assume you want some clothes, a decent car, perhaps a date or two with your friends. Let's say 50 grand, said Mr. Larson. 50 grand? Hey, the party's at my house, said another boy. We'd be talking live music, Mr. Larson, said another. Now you're starting to think like a bureaucrat, said Mr. Larson, sitting up on his stool in the front of the class. So that's most of Chapter 8 out of Charm of Favor. I think you enjoyed that. And if you want to know how to get it, it's easy to do. You go to my website, brooksagnew.com, click on the store link, and you can access it there. You can buy the paperback, you can buy the Kindle. Either way, you buy either one of those, I will give you the audiobook, which is read slightly better than I read it to you there, for free. So if you're not a good reader, don't worry about it. I read it for you. Let's check out the chat room. What's going on there? Wow. Yeah, Steve says the Trump team is taking over the social media. Frankly, I can't wait till that happens. Don't hold your breath, because a lot more has to be done than that. Not only does he have to invent the social media, which is not that hard, just clone what's already out there. There are several out there. There's Anon Up, there's Safe Chat, there's MAGA Chat, there's all kinds of social media out there. But you also have to find a place to host it. And this is where it gets kind of tricky, because there are several aspects to hosting. The first is storage space. Oh, you can buy storage space. I'm getting texts that say they enjoyed Chapter 8. That was most of it. It's a large chapter. It goes a little bit further. Jack Rousseau gets into a lot of action in the Pentagon. It is an action-adventure, true crime adventure story. So you'll enjoy it. If you buy the book, I promise you'll like it. It should be a big screen movie. But the other thing to be considered besides storage is pretty easy to buy. The other is bandwidth. Now, this is a little different in the sense this is the pipeline. Now, how many of you out there watch movies on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon Prime? No, I'm not gonna mention Disney Plus. I did mention it. We don't do Disney Plus here. We just don't, because they canceled one of my favorite stars. So because she said something that was too politically incorrect. Sorry. We don't do Disney Plus anymore. Don't pay them. Don't watch anything on it. But one thing you notice if you watch Netflix is the movies is stream fine. Even the number one movie, like they have 1 through 10. This is the movie that's trending number 1 today, so you need to watch it, right? If it's some genre that you like. I like anime. I've been watching a lot of foreign movies lately. I watched a series called it's Korean. It's Korean. That's pretty good. The Korean, they speak in Korean, but they subtitle it in English. And it's about the end of the world, apocalyptic world. You can watch it. The title escapes you right at the moment. But the point is that it doesn't buffer. That is because Netflix has a priority on the bandwidth of the internet. That means that other sites are sacrificed to provide bandwidth to Netflix. Netflix has a priority. They pay for it. So if you're going to create a social media, you have to have 3 things. You have to have storage space, you have to have bandwidth, and you have to have the program that actually functions. And there are several out there that functions. There's WeGo, used to be called We Go One, We Go All, where we go one, we go all. They changed it to WeGo. And it's great. I love it. I love the community there. I have a group there called Trumplican Coffee House. But it's slow. I mean, really slow. You post something and then you scroll down just a little bit and it stops. You got to wait for it to fill in. It's a bandwidth issue. If Trump forms a social media and he takes 70 million Americans to his new social media, he's going to be able to talk about what he wants, when he wants, how he wants, and so will everybody that goes there. But you got to have the bandwidth. And that is going to take some major bucks to make that happen. And I'm not sure if we can stream live there, but we are going to try. We're trying to add Foxhole. Ever hear of Foxhole? Foxhole's a comfy bunkhouse, they call it. But it's a place where all the anons that have been driven off other social media go to associate. And you can stream live there, but it takes a little bit of work. And we're trying right now to get the stream key so that we can stream to that audience as well. Hang on a second. Oh, yes, anime. Yes, I like anime. There's one that's free. You don't have to pay to watch it. I'm going to make a suggestion. Let me write it in here. Let's see. It is called... yeah. I'm going to put it in here. It's... Space Pirate. And I believe it is... or something. It's right there on the tip of my tongue. Here's I've been talking for an hour and a half, and I just lost it. Anyway, it's Har something Space Pirate, and you can watch it on YouTube. It's free. And I'm telling you, the animation and the storyline is fabulous. If you don't like anime, you're going to like it by the time you finish with this. You'll like it, I promise. Put that into YouTube and you can find it. Yes, I get it, Space Lincoln. I get it about the vaccination. I'm not a vaxxer. I believe we are the cure, and we always have been. All right, let's get back to it. How much time we got in this segment? Because I read and read Chapter 8. Okay, we've got about 8 minutes. This is good. By the way, we are back to funding terrorism. Oh, yes, it didn't take long. Imagine this scenario for a moment. A man who lives in another state who you know hates you. He steals your car, he kills your family, he defecates on your porch, and then brags about it, even threatening to do it again. And then imagine this person, years later, asks you to borrow $100,000. Would you do it? This should be a no-brainer. The answer is no. I don't even need to think about that one. If that's the case, and it's common sense, then why, as a country, do we do exactly this? President Trump worked very hard to pull funding from anywhere that he knew would end up falling into the hands of terrorist organizations, but not with Virtual Joe in the White House. He is undoing what President Trump did. Virtual Joe just authorized the release of $3 billion to Iran. But why? The United States has agreed to the release of $3 billion in Iranian funds that have been frozen in Iraq, Oman, and South Korea due to Washington's sanctions. Iranian trade official Hamid Hosseini told the semi-official Fars news agency today. Hosseini, board member of the Iran-Iraq Joint Chamber of Commerce, had tweeted on Friday that Washington approved the release of frozen Iranian assets at the Trade Bank of Iraq without mentioning the value of the assets. It's $3 billion. U.S. sanctions imposed by President Trump have prevented Iran from accessing tens of billions of dollars of its assets in foreign banks. Iranian frozen assets in Iraq amounted to more than $6 billion, according to Iranian officials. The head of the Iran-South Korea Chamber of Commerce said in October Iranian frozen funds in South Korea are worth more than $8.5 billion and added that their release depended on the outcome of the U.S. presidential election. What we're seeing is basically Obama-like policies when it comes to foreign policy. But with everything else, he's just doing the radical left's bidding. All this from Virtual Joe. Now, I'm going to give you a little history lesson. Allow me to play Mr. Larson here just for a second. I call this section the other pipeline, and you're going to understand what I mean by this. We need to do a little catch-up here, so just bear with me. You recall in November of 2013, President Putin contacted President Yanukovych of Ukraine to stop him from signing a trade deal with the European Union. It's in the book also, but I'll talk about it in detail right here. The deal would have made Ukraine the bitch of the EU overlords in a finance tactic that they had been using for decades to take over the third world. They've been doing it all over the world. And it's something that we have used as well. Without admitting Ukraine to the European Union, which would allow them to enter without a passport, they would have been able to move NATO assets right up to Russia's southern tip once the Ukraine defaulted on the loans. They would have had a tax-free pipeline to the Russian gas and oil that George Soros would control. Instead, Putin lavished Ukraine with a bailout package worth at least $20 billion in December of 2013. trumping the West in a Cold War-tinged struggle that keeps the former Soviet Republic in Moscow's orbit. Remember, Ukraine has been part of Russia since 1760. The pact, once one of the richest ever offered by Russia to another country, came just weeks after Kiev turned its back on that trade deal with the EU that Moscow had strongly opposed. Of course, Obama was building something else with ISIS. He did not want Europe to have access to Russian gas. One way or the other, he wanted the gas to come from the Golan Heights through a pipeline that he and Iran would control. So, Obama sent Johns McCain and Kerry to wreck the deal. Within days of Yanukovych's refusing to enter into a trade agreement with the European Union, McCain and Kerry, under the direct leadership of Virtual Joe, plunged the country into staggering violent protests against the president's decision. They worked tirelessly for weeks organizing the protests, and then, by ordering riot police, advanced on the protesters' stronghold. They wanted a conflict. The anti-government activists have been defending a stage which has become the nexus of their message. And according to the New York Times, the stage was intact. It was ringed by a series of fires lit by the protesters as they burned their tents and sleeping bags as the last line of defense. Not enough people were dying to draw the attention of the international press. Remember, this raged for about 6 weeks. No one was paying any attention. It was like the Yellow Vest revolt in France. It was like the Romanians that this weekend filled the entire city, and yet no one in the world paid any attention whatsoever. You see the pictures of it? It makes our protests look like a walk in the park. Millions of people in the streets. Millions. So they called in Victoria Nuland. She organized a charge of more than 100 Ukrainians against the police forces to push them back. Then she ordered American Army snipers in position on the rooftops to shoot them dead in the streets while the ABC cameras were rolling. John McCain and John Kerry handled the rest. While Russia, a proclaimed ally to Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych, issued a statement condemning the criminal activities of radical opposition forces and blaming the anti-government activists for causing the bloodshed, the United States has reached out directly to Yanukovych to urge him to pull back. Now, Virtual Joe, the guy who's president of the United States right now, Virtual Joe, called up Mr. Yanukovych on the phone to express grave concern regarding the crisis on the streets. Hang on a second, I've got to send TFR to break. And urge him to pull back government forces and to exercise maximum restraint. In other words, they wanted him to quit. Secretary of State John Kerry urged Yanukovych to stop the bloodshed. We call on President Yanukovych and the Ukrainian government to de-escalate the situation immediately and resume dialogue with the opposition on a peaceful path forward. It wasn't him doing the shooting. It wasn't his government doing the shooting. Ukraine's deep divisions will not be healed by spilling more innocent blood. Blah, 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 blah. They forced Yanukovych to flee the country, where he attempted to rule in exile from Crimea. After all, he was Crimean. Kerry and McCain installed their own leadership to oppose the Putin deal and resumed building ISIS to force the gas pipeline from the Golan Heights. As you recall, President Trump wiped ISIS out, and he stopped the southern pipeline, which allowed Russia to become the largest gas and oil supplier to the EU. Now, you know Obama is back in power, as Virtual Joe was installed during the 2020 coup. How long has it been? Oh, how can we forget? It's been barely 62 days since Virtual Joe took the oath of office. They have resumed right where they left off. All contacts between Russia and NATO were suddenly and completely cut off yesterday, just hours after the United States warned all entities working on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, then restarted its construction within days of President Trump's eviscerating ISIS, to immediately abandon all work or face U.S. economic sanctions. The Nord Stream 2 is a gas pipeline under construction to supply natural gas from Russia to Europe. Just like the XL pipeline in the United States, Virtual Joe stopped the construction of that pipeline. He stopped the pipeline in Europe as well. The Nord Stream 2 pipeline would have transported natural gas into the European Union to enhance security of supply, support climate goals, and strengthen the internal energy market. It would have made war between Russia and the EU a virtual impossibility. It would have rendered NATO absolutely obsolete. The EU's domestic gas production is in rapid decline. To meet demand, the EU needs reliable, affordable, and sustainable new gas supplies. The Nord Stream 2 pipeline would have provided this by transporting gas from the world's largest gas reserves in Russia to the EU internal market. But Nord Stream 2 allows Euro buyers to bypass the Soros-created bottleneck in the Ukraine. Yeah, John McCain is dead. John Kerry is back in power. Virtual Joe is holding the place for Obama to resume building his Islamic State. Iran stands to make trillions off the deal. Saudi Arabia and the Emirates can already see the world war coming. Now you can see the real forces lining up while we are distracted with the CCP human rights violations. Let's go ahead and bring TFR back in. Final hour. Hour number 3. Obama knows that a Russian pipeline would make his Islamic State powerless to control Europe. So he wrote this as though Virtual Joe was saying it. I quote, "As multiple U.S. administrations have made clear, this pipeline is a Russian geopolitical project intended to divide Europe and weaken European energy security. The sanctions legislation Congress passed in 2019 and expanded in 2020 has significant support from a bipartisan congressional majority." And he said the administration is committed to complying with the legislation. Literally, within hours of the U.S. issuing this statement and telling everyone to abandon the work on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, Russia cut off all contacts with NATO, and a Russian Kilo-class submarine disappeared off the coast of Lebanon. Thursday of last week, of course, Virtual Joe caused a diplomatic furor when he referred to Russian President Putin as a killer who has no soul, after which Russia recalled its ambassador to the United States for consultation. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs expressed hope to change irreversible deterioration of U.S.-Russia relations. Well, right on cue, violence is making the news. Yesterday, Fierce clashes between the Ukrainian army and forces from the Russia-favoring breakaway states of Luhansk and Donetsk. These forces have not been using heavy guns or rockets against one another since Trump was elected. He is the one who boosted the lethality of the Ukrainians to defend themselves by sending Javelin anti-tank weapons. It appears the balance has been tilted as intense battles are said to be raging in eastern Ukraine. If this spreads to the isthmus, this is the small section of land that connects Russia and Ukraine together, the region could be plunged into conflict not easily halted. Once the body count reaches a certain point, there will be no forgiveness on either side. These are the most capable fighters in the world, and they have been fighting for thousands of years. This morning, tanks from the Russian army began crossing the border from Russia into Ukraine. In case you think this was an invasion, it wasn't. Those tanks were invited in by the governing body of Donetsk and Luhansk to protect the people there from Ukraine government troops massed on the western borders of those two states I mentioned. The patch on the shoulder of the government troops looks a whole lot like the old Nazi SS patch. They also use Al-Qaeda fighters who will fight for a paycheck. The communist people of Luhansk and Donetsk want to leave Ukraine and become part of Russia. Ukraine says no. Over the past 2 weeks, Ukraine has built up its armed forces on the western border of those two states to take them back by force if necessary. They don't want to see them join Russia the way Crimea did. Remember, Crimea annexed themselves to Russia. Just across the bay there is Russia. Crimeans speak Russian. They freely travel back and forth between Russia and Crimea across using the ferry. They didn't want to be part of the EU. The EU tried to saddle them with a whole bunch of debt. They rejected it. They voluntarily voted to become annexed to Russia. Russia did not invade Crimea. Crimeans are Russians, okay? And that's exactly what Donetsk and Luhansk wants to do. With the entry of the Russian army tanks today, it will now explicitly say, without a doubt, Russia itself will militarily engage any Ukrainian or NATO troops trying to attack Luhansk or Donetsk. By the way, NATO has, so coincidentally, begun military drills in the Black Sea and the countries surrounding Ukraine. You know how those drills go, right? Troops show up to practice just in time to be used for actual fighting in the area. This is very close to the starting point of every single major war in Europe. This is exactly what the global syndicate wants. They calculate that no one is going to build a gas pipeline through an area covered in shoulder-fired rockets and 20-millimeter Gatling guns. Obama's deal with Iran to bring the pipeline from Golan to Europe was delayed when Hillary lost the 2016 election. George Soros may just be the most powerful anti-American force in the world today. Again, he bought governors, he bought secretaries of state, he bought district attorneys, and he bought judges. There's still time to save the world, but not much. It has been 62 days. Every day that passes, it becomes exponentially harder to recover the republic. The only man in the world who can stop this is Donald Trump. And he is an enemy of the state, just like you and me. So everyone is asking, When will the real Obama agenda please stand up? Ever wonder why Valerie Jarrett gave Obama everything he needed to get through college? Ever wonder why she had secret police protection, secret service protection? Ever wonder about her having supper every night with him? Her parents were rich and deep into the Muslim Brotherhood of Iran. And now former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is warning that even if the Biden administration's policy on Iran continues, the rogue Islamic regime will one day hold the world hostage to its nuclear ambitions. You can feel it. The Virtual Joe administration is preparing to underwrite the Iranian regime and appease its mayhem and murder on the same theory that it did in 2015. Pay them and enter the JCPOA, or there will be war. The JCPOA is the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the nuclear deal, brokered by John Kerry and John McCain and the Obama administration and other nations, in which billions of dollars in frozen assets was released to the Islamic regime. This asserted logic provided a seemingly powerful message for Americans who didn't want their sons and daughters fighting in the Middle East. It was repeated over and over and over again by John Kerry, by Wendy Sherman, by Robert Malley, until many came to wrongly believe this binary set of American policy options represented the only two ways to prevent Iran from achieving a nuclear weapon. Today, he wrote, it's the same cast of characters that appears to be getting ready to capitulate and permit the funding of Iranian terror, assassination, missile building, and massive anti-Semitism. If it does, the Ayatollah Khamenei will one day hold the world hostage to its nuclear ambitions, said Pompeo. The past 4 years, he said, have exposed the fact that the JCPOA was a false set of choices. The deal was based on 4 fundamental false assertions. First, if there is no JCPOA, there will be war. We left the JCPOA. There is no war. The second falsehood is that American sanctions alone cannot stop Iran from selling crude oil. But U.S. sanctions withheld hundreds of billions of dollars from the regime. The JCPOA also held that Iran would come clean about its nuclear program's history. But, he said, Iran still refuses to allow inspections at nuclear sites. What else are they concealing about their nuclear program? Finally, the JCPOA was supposed to lead to a bigger deal for peace. Instead, the Iranians made clear there was never to be, nor would there ever be, a discussion regarding missiles or terror if the deal is in place. Pompeo said real progress in the Middle East came when the U.S. pulled out of the JCPOA, and going back is not going to help. Keep in mind the concessions to Iran may not be pallets of cash this time. That relief could come in the additional lifting of sanctions. Iran's terror arm in Yemen has already been declared not to be terrorists. And the Trump administration's successful effort to extend the JCPOA ban on Iranian arms sales and purchase, that was set at just 5 years. It has already been thrown out. Or they might allow billions of dollars to flow to the Iranian regime from assets frozen and prohibited from transiting to Iran by the Trump administration, from Korea, from elsewhere in the world. Without these powerful sanctions, alongside a credible threat of military force, Iran's religious leaders never will give up their plans for nuclear weapons and regional domination. Capitulation is not going to change Iranian behavior. Doing so would be a mistake for the security of the American people, our Israeli and Gulf state friends, and just as assuredly for the good people of Iran, who are looking for the world to act so as to diminish the power of the Iranian regime, to steal from them, to shoot them, and deny them their most basic freedoms. We have openly called many times on this program for Persia to rise up and overthrow the Iranian regime. Iranian means Aryan. They aligned themselves with Nazi Germany very early on. That's where the word Iran comes from. It means Iranian. It means Aryan, which is aligning them with Nazis. They need to return to their original Persia. That's what I'm saying. I don't know. Space Lincoln Landrew says Iran's controlled by Russia. I don't think that's true. I think Russia has given a lot of things to the Middle East. You can go to Egypt and you can see dams. The Aswan Dam was built with Russian help. I think you can see in Saudi Arabia and in the Emirates and in the Abraham Accords that are being lined up with Israel that there's a great force being put together for peace in the Middle East. And the reason that force is coming together, I think it's many-fold. First, I think it's economic, so there can be open trade and travel between the countries of the Middle East. Second, I think it is Islamic reform that is inevitable, that must come. And this is reform of the religion of Islam, not the texts, not the writings. All that can stay the way it is, but you need to reform the religion so that it doesn't become a religion of hate. It doesn't become a religion of the oppression of women and the enslaving of other peoples. And that can be done. Christianity went through it, and Christianity is probably weaker now than it's ever been in the history of the world because people woke up, people became compassionate, and they became merciful, and they had a direct connection with Jesus the Christ instead of having to go through the church. So the church is less powerful than it was, and that needs to happen in Islam as well. On the other side of this, you have Iran. Iran and Turkey sit by themselves, and they want to, under the leadership of Barack Hussein Obama, build this Islamic State. So obviously, the sides that are being squared off in the Middle East conflict, which was almost gone, another 4 years of Trump and the Middle East conflict would be a thing of the distant past, is now materializing again because these hundreds of billions of dollars are going to flow back into the mullahs in Iran, and they're going to be just as powerful, if not more powerful, than they were before. And that is where the battle is going to stem from. Thanking everybody in the chat room for listening. Let's see, what is it, Greenheart? Michelle McAnamer, thank you so much, and thank you to all friends in Brooks Agnew and Revolution Radio, Freedom Slips chat, and I will keep you all in my prayers always. Well, if you're leaving us tonight, thank you very much. If you're staying with us, thank you very much for the support. I think that the conflict is coming. What is it? Bards of War and Remnants Arsenal. Oh, Remnants Arise, Unite, Spine straight, shoulders back, head up, eyes forward, fight, fight, fight. Okay, I'm with you. What form that fight takes remains to be seen. I think right now we're in danger of losing our republic. 62 days. I don't know if we can take 65 days of it. Every single day is bringing another one of these terrible things that is tearing down our country. This section I call the administrative state. Lockdowns should have shown every American just how tyrannical and reasonable our leaders can be. I would have never thought that I would have had to been forced to sign a cancellation of my gym membership because I wouldn't strap a diaper across my face. I'm sorry. They left me no choice. I was not going to kneel. I was not going to put the face diaper on. And so I am no longer working out at that gym. There are elected leaders that have acted as outright tyrants, alienating everyone without regard. Then there are the unelected bureaucrats who wave away our liberties with the stroke of a pen from the secrecy of their massive offices with their technocratic efficiency. Then there are the empowered thugs in our community, like this young man at the gym, who feel they have been given authority to command us to obey. This is all, of course, a sudden and dramatic curtailing of our freedoms. They are banning the smile. They are placing us in solitary confinement because they like it. I would not be surprised that with this much public attention, some sort of effort will be made to roll back much of what has been done. Although lockdowns are certainly an existential threat to our long-term freedoms and system of liberal democracy, there's been another specter out there many experts have been sounding the alarm on for decades, and that is the growth of the administrative state. You could call it the deep state, you can call it the cabal, I call it the global syndicate. The chilling narrative about the growth of the administrative state, which is essentially the regulatory apparatus of the executive branch, is usually confined to specialist professions. The ever-present danger of a slowly expanding and unaccountable apparatus of bureaucrats that threatens to sap the life out of American society and drown it in a sea of paperwork is typically a concern that only keeps policy wonks and lawyers up at night. Although many lawyers probably celebrate this dystopian vision because they benefit from the compliance fees, the regulatory state not only threatens us to make society that much slower and dreary with its excessive onslaught of regulation, but it also makes us poorer. Okay? No one really knows by how much, but there is ample evidence that regulation has expanded and that this expansion has limited economic growth. The regulatory state refers to organizations such as the Environmental Protectionist Agency, the Centers for Disease Control, the Federal Trade Commission, the Department of Education, the Department of Injustice, the Internal Revenue Service, and all the other three-letter agencies in Washington, D.C. If you would like to see how long the list is, you can go to the Federal Register. You know, there are over 650 of them. Yeah, and that number is absolutely mind-boggling when you consider that each one has thousands of employees, and each employee gets about $100,000 a year, and they cannot be fired for any reason. The first Congress to meet, once the Constitution was ratified, created a post office. And they created departments of war, Navy, Foreign Affairs, Treasury, each in unique ways suited to its responsibility. This new government employed few civil servants to manage all of its affairs. You know, the first serious count of federal civilian employees in 1816 reported they numbered 4,837. That's about the right size for federal government, don't you think? Well, the drastic expansion of the administrative state began in 1933 under Roosevelt and has come to grow to consume almost our entire system of liberty. Yeah, it spends all of our tax dollars. It is a lawmaking body. It is a tax assessor. But we, the people, have no representation in that government. Now, according to Article 1 of the Constitution, the legislative branch or Congress is supposed to be the primary lawmaking body of our government. That is because if there are bad laws or laws society doesn't like, we can hold people accountable because we elect them and we can unelect them. However, more and more power has been shifted to the executive branch because of the growth of the administrative state. Even the judicial system is losing power to the administrative state after the establishment of a legal doctrine known as the Chevron deference, which binds the court system to defer to the administrative agency's interpretation of a rule, not the constitutional interpretation of a sitting judge. It shouldn't be too hard to assume that the interpretation will probably favor the ambitions of the agency and not the integrity of the Constitution. It happens all the time. The worst part about all of this is that we, the people, society, continues to tell itself that those in the administrative state are simply humble public servants. Although I'm sure many of them are, the hard reality is that at the end of the day, they're just like this thug down at the club. The source of income and advancement for bureaucrats, just like jobs in the private sector are for everyone else. But there's a sense of power. Now, the Washington Monument Syndrome gets its name because when the National Park Service was faced with budget cuts, instead of streamlining its finances like a normal private company, they protested by shutting down the Washington Monument rather than taking sensible steps to cut costs. In the private sector, there is a natural check of how much workers can demand, such as the threat of going out of business. In the public sector, there are no such restraints. This is part of the reason why the bureaucracy simply grows and grows and grows, taking our freedom as well as our treasure as it does. Finally, there is the dark fact that there are ambitious people in the administrative state who want to make a name for themselves at the expense of you. If there aren't any problems to solve, hotshot regulators are trying to move up the food chain by creating problems to solve by either targeting innocent private actors or trying to pump up their resumes with unnecessary sanctions. The problem is well known when it comes to the criminal justice system, as prosecutors leverage plea bargains to increase their incarceration statistics regardless of the guilt of the defendant and without ever having to take a case to trial, which is a constitutional right. However, this system of perverse incentives to simply rack up wins at the expense of society is present in the regulatory state, as well as agencies bringing the government's boot down on businesses just trying to provide a good service. Now, what I want to get to is a solution, because we're always solutions driven here. So right now we're going to let TFR go to break. We'll talk a little bit about what the situation is with the chat room, and then we're going to talk about a solution, because a lot of people have their hands up and they're saying, wait a minute, 655 agencies, departments, bureaus, and administrations with 2 million employees, how can we stop that? We can, and we must, and I'll show you how right after we get back from break. Hold on a second. Let me take this call from Mr. Jay Moore, Bulldog. We are live on the air, and Jay Moore is on the phone with us. How are you, Bulldog? Hang on a second. Turn the volume up here. Yep, I'm in Charlotte right now. We're live on the air, and you're live with us. Oh, there we go. Now we got the speaker on. Now everyone can hear you.
I was just saying that, I'm only going to be about 35 minutes north of you up in motels up in Salisbury.
Well, that's good. Yeah, Salisbury's close enough. We can get together and throw some darts. Are you listening? Are you listening to tonight's
you've
program?
been practicing, huh?
No.
No?
I'll never be good enough to beat you. I just like playing.
Well, actually, you might now. I had heart surgery a couple of years ago, and some of the things didn't come back quite right, so I had to redevelop a whole dart thing again. Right?
Oh, so they gave you a heart? Is that what it is?
No. I just had to do a bypass.
Well, most people come out of that pretty good.
No. They wouldn't give me a heart, man. They go, you can't kill that much evil. They take special daggers and stuff.
That's right. So we're talking about a convention of states tonight. Are you familiar with that?
A convention of states?
Yes. The Article 5 convention, which is where the states come together, amend the Constitution, and they do it from a state standpoint instead of a congressional standpoint.
Well, from a federal, yes.
Yeah. And well, actually, the states do it. They amend the Constitution and bring the federal government back into line.
Right. Yeah, okay.
It's never been done, but we're trying to do it.
Well, if the South would have won the Civil War, that would have been the North's next chance. Right?
Yeah, the War of Northern
Hopefully
Aggression.
Yes, I suppose.
Well, we have the same.
They didn't need to do that, but
the same things are setting up again.
States' rights. I mean, I think that's one of the coolest things about our Constitution. When you've been in the federal government as a soldier, and you've also been as a state soldier, and the oath meanings are just a little bit different. Where states, your oath could mean your enemy, foreign, domestic, could be the federal government because you're under the control of the governor.
That's exactly right.
You're basically his protection.
Right. So right now we're going through what we call nullification. A lot of the states are saying you can write all the executive orders you want, but they're not going to have any effect in our state. Now, obviously, this is going to turn into a pissing match between the states and the federal government. But 21 states are suing the federal government over stopping the XL pipeline. I have a feeling those states have a lot of power.
Well, the states always did. Problem is, the system became where the federal government was giving money to the states. And you don't do what I tell you, I'm not going to give you your money.
That's exactly right.
And there really wasn't an issue, or there wasn't an outcry enough within the side of the state for the governor to go, I'm not doing that.
Well, not only that, we don't not only have the federal government, we have other governments. We have Chinese, we have foreign investors who are coming into these states, buying governors, buying secretaries of state, DAs, judges, and they're having their effect.
For years.
Yeah, we saw the results of that in the 2020 election.
And it always irritated me that people would never. Well, another thing too, it cracks me up is when right after a president is either in office still or right after he gets out, they talk about all the things he did that make it the way it is at this moment in time. And it takes about 8 years for anything a president to do to actually manifest and see what happened from it. It doesn't happen the day he leaves office.
That's
true. Nobody's that good, especially the way how slow the federal government works.
Well, it seems like the federal government has been working very quickly under Virtual Joe. He's only up 2 or 3 hours a day, but he's managing to get the federal government to jump through a lot of hoops for him.
Well, I think the federal government is trying to just embrace the circus that Trump created. I'm not saying I'm not saying anything about policies or action or anything like that. It's just that, how many times have you heard about your president twittering you a day? Okay, it was almost like we had a junior high kid in the White House, right?
Yeah, it's cool, isn't it?
In some cases, right?
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I'm all for the technology and things like that, and it was cool that Trump was willing to embrace that. But I really just, it's no different than Sarah sends you. I'm at Walmart. Sarah, I understand that, and that's great for you, but I really don't care that you're at Walmart.
Well, it wasn't exactly like that.
I'm sitting in Burger King, so I mean, did I one up? Yeah, I mean, what?
Well, we want transparency in government, and then when we get it, we complain about it.
Oh, I know.
Anyway, I gotta get
baby stuff I can't stand anymore.
I got to get back to our program. Let's get together and let's play darts sometime for sure.
Well, what I was saying is that Chris on Saturday.
Okay.
And I'll just cruise down to Charlotte and we'll hang out all day.
Yeah, that's cool. I'll do it right after the program.
What time's the program?
It ends at 11, so I'm on for another 27 minutes.
No, I'm talking about on Saturday.
Oh, Saturday. Saturday all day. Anytime Saturday is fine.
Okay, cool. All right, well, just text me your address and I'll cruise down and see you.
Shall be done. Talk to you soon.
Man. Good.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
That's Jay Moore, the Bulldog. How do I know Jay Moore? Jay Moore was a executive recruiter par excellence out of Tell City, Indiana. Genius of a man. Absolutely gifted when it comes to speaking to people. Really, really good at it. All right, so we were talking about the Convention of States. We're getting there. And the key takeaway from all this is this. If the lockdowns were a sudden and brutal assault, on our liberties, if they just, came after us, like the rise of the administrative state would be the silent killer, right? It keeps itself away from the public spotlight, only raising alarms for the communities it directly affects, and the policy wonks who enjoy ranting about taxes and federal codes all day. To the average person, you and me, the only time we really worry about it is April 15th when we pay our taxes. But every year, this cabal, this shadow government, this global syndicate, this administrative state, it grows and it grows with little incentive to care for the trouble it has caused for the rest of American society. It is the true embodiment of the Leviathan illustrated by Hobbes. Although there is certainly a time and place for regulatory agencies today, they have so greatly outgrown their bounds to the point they are becoming an unelected judge, jury, and executioner. And if you don't believe me, just ask the restaurateur, Hackney, who's in jail tonight because she refused to close her restaurant. What was a handful of executive agencies at the beginning of the Republic has now become an expansive list of alphabet soup abbreviations, all of which have the force of law. So why call a convention of states? Simple. To bring power back to the states and to you, the people. Gee, that sounds a little bit like President Trump's inaugural address, doesn't it? Unelected bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. should not be allowed to make sweeping decisions that impact millions of Americans. But right now, that is what they do. So it all boils down to one question. Who do you think should decide what's best for you and your family? Why, you, of course. But it's not. It's the federal government. It's this agency cabal, dark shadow government that does. So what is a convention of states? People ask me that all the time. I was talking to the mighty Jay Moore just now on the phone, and he didn't know what a convention of states was. Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution gives states the power to call a convention of states to propose amendments to the Constitution. It takes 34 states to call the convention and 38 states to ratify any amendments that are proposed. Our convention would only allow the states to discuss amendments that will limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, impose fiscal restraints, and place term limits on federal officials. You want term limits? This is the only way it can happen. So let's discuss it. talk about term limits. What does that mean? There is some debate, but here are the general ideas. When Congress was first invented, okay, we're not talking about the Senate, we're talking about Congress, congressmen. It was considered a analog to the House of Commons in Britain, okay? These are ordinary people, farmers and blacksmiths and writers and newspapermen, okay? Ordinary people that have property and have jobs and have investment and have some popular presence in their community. They're to go to Washington and represent that community. It's not a big area. It only represents a few tens of thousands of people. That's who you represent. And you go to Washington and you do that. But in the early days, it was considered a burden. First of all, it was a long ride. It took a week, 10 days to get to Washington. You were worn out by the time you got there. It was hot. There was no air conditioning. There was no electricity. It's just not the way it is today. So the term was set at 2 years because it was a burden. It was a burden. You got to give up your business for a good portion of the year because Congress didn't go for the full 12 months. It only went for a certain number of months each of those 2 years. You travel to Washington and write law. You would represent your community in the writing of law. And there was a lot of debate and very little actual work got done, but eventually it got that way. And, of course, the wages went up and Congress became full-time job very soon. But today, it only takes a few hours to get to Washington, and many of the congressmen have an apartment or a house in Washington, or they relocate to Washington when they become a congressman, and they go back home during the holidays to meet with constituents. Now we can meet with constituents by phone or by Zoom, and it's as though you're right at home anyway. So the 2 years is no longer an issue. So I propose in my book, Alienated Nation, that we lengthen the term of a congressman to 4 years from 2 years. There's no sense in them arriving in Washington in January and immediately having to start fundraising because they're going to run again in 20 months. It's just nutso. You're in campaign mode every single day. You don't get any work done for the people. So we change the term of Congress to 4 years. Okay? The second thing that we do is that we limit the number of terms to 3. You serve 12 years and you're gone. That's it. You can't serve any more than 12 years. And you only have to worry about being reelected twice. You get elected, and then you only have 2 more elections to worry about. Hence, all the money comes out of politics. You don't have to worry about building a dynasty because you're not going to be there for 30 years. You're not going to build a network. You're not going to build a Nancy Pelosi, a Maxine Waters, a Sheila Jackson Lee. You're not going to become a political powerhouse that cannot be stopped because you're only going to be there for 2 elections and you're gone. That's 2 things. The second thing that falls under term limits would be, of course, the Senate. Now, the Senate is a little different thing. The Senate was actually allowed to run for election by amendment. Yeah. The Senate used to be appointed. It was appointed by the state legislatures. The state legislature was considered local politics. We elected our state congressmen and state senators. Those bodies would come together, pick 2 senators, and send them to Washington to represent them, and they served for 6 years. Now, it was then in the 1800s when they amended the Constitution and allowed senators to run for election at large. This is what brought the money into politics. Because the Senate, as you know, there are only 100 of them. Each one of them controls 1/100th of the federal budget. That's very powerful. Very, very powerful. And so what the senators would do is they would draw money, not just from people in the state. Screw the people in the state. They draw money from George Soros. They draw money from China. They draw money from Russia. They draw money from giant corporations who pump money not only into their campaign, but also into political action committees. So you might be running for Senate in Oklahoma, but you're drawing money from Hollywood. You're drawing money from Seattle, from Miami, from Houston. You're drawing money from New York and Boston and Chicago to run in Oklahoma. Your ability to raise money can assure you that you're going to win. Look what happened to Warnock and this election down in Georgia. They raised a tremendous amount of money from Hollywood, and they were able to beat 2 incumbent senators in that state. Of course, they bought the election system as well. They had to buy the Secretary of State. They had to buy the governor. And, of course, they had Stacey Abrams working for them as well, who's under criminal investigation for that entire election. So what we want to do, I think there's 2 options here. One is we could limit the Senate to 3 terms, 18 years, and you're gone. That's the simple way. The other way is to repeal the old amendment and return the Senate to state legislature appointments. You know what that would do? That would take billions and billions of dollars out of the election system. It would, because now senators wouldn't be running for election. You wouldn't see any campaign ads for senators. They'd be appointed by state legislatures. The state legislatures are directly influenced by you. You go to your state house. You talk to your state congressman who lives 4 blocks down the street. You talk to your state senator who lives right over there in the other neighborhood. And you are the one that now has more contact with your state senator, your U.S. senator, than you had before, because once he gets elected, he's in Washington. You can't touch John Kerry. You can't touch these senators, Rand Paul or Ted Cruz. You can't reach these people. They're unreachable. But you could if they were appointed by the state. And then you could limit them to 3 terms. So these are the things that could be done with term limits. We could take so much money out of politics it wouldn't be funny. You could remove the influence of all the money. You would remove the dynasties that are created by being in Washington for so long and making so many deals and gathering so much dirt on people. You would keep Congress the way it was supposed to be, held by common people, representing common people, of, by, and for the people. That's one section of amendments proposed by the Convention of States. The other one is fiscal restraints. How about a balanced budget amendment? How about a way to prevent the federal government from raising taxes without a 2/3 majority of the states? Yeah. How about the limiting of things that obligate us, like sending money to foreign countries as aid? Instead of that happening at the sole whim of the State Department or the president, that now has to be approved by a council of states. See, because the tax money actually comes from the states. You don't tax the federal government. You don't tax the federal budget. You tax the states, and the states end up sending that federal tax to the federal government. Also, what falls under this fiscal constraints or fiscal restraints is the 16th Amendment, which is a power that is given to the IRS to tax wages and income. If you repeal the 16th Amendment and said now the federal government does not have the authority to tax income. In fact, the federal government doesn't have the right to know how much income you earn. Yeah, right. You waive your 5th Amendment right every time you sign a 1040. You are saying, this is how much money I earned under threat of federal prosecution to the fullest extent of the law, blah, blah, blah. That's what you're saying. You're waiving your 5th Amendment right. The government now knows, the IRS knows how much you earn in interest, and your wages are 100% profit, so that's how they tax you. If we did away with the income tax, you would no longer have to file, ever. What we would replace it with is a federal sales tax. Now, we could say a flat tax, but if we did a flat tax, the government would still have to know how much you earn, right? They would still have to know how much money you make to know that the 10% or 8% or 11% is the right value, because were you really truthful in how much you earned? If we went to federal sales tax, none of that would apply. You could earn as much as you want, any way you want. You could sell your body, you could sell your mind, you could sell your products, anything you want to make money. That's legal. Don't sell drugs, and you can't traffic anybody. You could traffic yourself. You could sell your own body, sell your sexual benefits, your massage benefits, your mind, anything you want. Make your money any way you want. Make interest, invest in real estate, gather rent, anything you want. Collect the money any way you want. Put it in the bank. You don't pay the tax. The government has no right to know how much money you have or where you earned it or how you earned it. It's when you spend the money that you pay the tax. When you buy a pair of shoes, when you buy a bicycle or a motorcycle, when you buy a TV set or a computer, when you buy a firearm, you pay the tax. Everybody pays. And guess what? Newsflash. Rich people spend more than poor people. Yeah, rich people spend more than poor people. And so they're going to pay more tax. Now, you're going to get a gigantic windfall because you're going to take in a whole lot more taxpayers. First of all, about 30 million illegal aliens that don't pay any income tax at all right now. They're all going to pay the tax. About 20 million tourists that are inside our country right now, every given day, at least 20 million tourists. They're going to pay the tax. Yeah, they don't pay any income tax when they're here. Converting their yuan or their yen or their euros or their pesos to dollars, they don't pay tax. They pay tax when they buy stuff. Everybody pays the tax. Rich people, poor people, illegal aliens, and tourists all pay the tax. Your overhead drops. Now you no longer need 75,000 IRS agents to audit all these people to find out if they're telling the truth or not and process all the paperwork. You just have money coming in. Now, I'm not saying we get rid of the IRS. We use the IRS to audit the other agencies. We go after all the agencies, departments, bureaus, and administrations, and we tell the IRS, eliminate all the waste, fraud, and abuse you can find. I think if they're very capable, they could do it. In about a decade, it could be done. In the meantime, you could start drawing down the force of the IRS because it would no longer be needed. The people would truly be free to pursue their happiness any way they want. And the only time they would pay the tax is when they buy stuff. Now that is fiscal restraints. And there's a third area for the Convention of States. It's as important as the other two. And that is the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. All those agencies have the power of law. They can all write regulations that have the force of law. They all have enforcement actions that can be taken. They can take your stuff. They can arrest you. They can send police to your house. They can send their own armed agents to your house. They can enforce their law. But you have no representation in that government. And so they're writing laws that are tyrannical. That is the purest definition of tyranny, is laws that are written without representation. So we would have to write an amendment or a series of amendments that would take away the federal authority of these agencies. They would no longer have the ability to write law without review. Their laws would have to be passed by the states. They could write a regulation. But when it got to the state, it could be debated on a state level, and the state could say, we're not going to comply with that. And that would take away the federal authority of the agencies. And Mona agrees with me. She says, very good idea, federal sales tax, until they keep raising it and raising it. Start at 1 or 2%. Within 5 years, it'll be 10, and so on and so forth. Yes, but remember that all of this is going to be linked to the gross domestic product. So, obviously, nobody ever pays a tax except the people, right? The people pay. The corporations don't pay. They never have. When the tax is put on the item, let's say it's 10%, then that's what the federal government draws. But now remember what I said, that in the amendment is a requirement that 2/3 of the states have to approve any tax increase. So it wouldn't be in the control of the federal government anymore. They would not be able to set arbitrarily 17%, 25%. They wouldn't be able to do that because it would have to go back to the states, and 2/3 of the states would have to approve it. Not Congress, not the Senate. This would have to come back to the states as a referendum, just like an amendment would come back to the states. And 2/3 of the states would have to agree to it. Now, you know, and I know what's going to happen. None of the states are ever going to agree to it. They're never going to let the tax be raised. So in order for the federal government to take in more money, guess what has to happen? The country has to be more productive. Instead of a $40 trillion gross domestic product, we're going to have to go to 45, 46, 48, 50. That's how the federal government brings in more money, and that's the way it should be. If the government wants to take in more money, it needs to increase the gross domestic product, which means everybody produces more. We become more efficient. We become more productive. And by that, the nation has more revenue. And if it goes down, guess what happens? The federal revenue goes down. It's a feedback system that works. It works. Now, if you don't know if your state has signed on to the Convention of States or not, you can go to the website, cosaction.com. It stands for Convention of States Action.com, cosaction.com, and you can participate. It's free. There are 3 million of us there. It all started with the writing of Alienated Nation in 2012, and in 9 years we have grown to 3 million people. We have powerful people that are involved in this, but we can't do it without you. You have to go to your state. You have to call your congressman. You have to call your state congressman and state senate and say, you have to sign on to the Convention of States application. You've got to do it. I want you to go out and look for the good in people and help it to grow a little bit every day. And before long, you will have saved the planet. This is America Free Radio. And I've been your host, Brooks Agnew, saying peace, Earth Explorers. Now go and do. And we will see you on Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. Please visit my website, brooksagnew.com, brooksagnew.com. Sign up for the webinars, buy the books. We'll see you on Wednesday.